Welcome to Synapse Sessions, the show where we talk with experts who are changing the game in Amazon selling. Today I'm joined by Jim Kennemer of Cosmos Sourcing, who's helped over 1,000 clients transition from just private label to also doing contract manufacturing across Asia since 2012. Jim breaks down why most sourcing outside of China requires contract manufacturing instead of private label, the real cost of Vietnamese production, and how customs bonded warehouses can save your cash flow during tariff chaos. If you're ready to move beyond tariffs and build a resilient supply chain, this conversation is going to show you how to make that happen. Let's jump into the session. So yeah, Jim, you've helped over 1,000 clients find suppliers in Asia for Amazon sellers facing rising tariffs lately. What's one of the biggest misconception about sourcing outside of China?
I think the biggest misconception that we kind of come into is we have a lot of sellers or clients who want to buy private label goods outside of China. And to be honest, there's not really that wide of selection of private label items outside of China. So, I mean, the majority of the projects we do tend to be contract manufacturing projects. So that's where the factory kind of expects clients to provide product spec sheets and tech packs for their products, and they'll make it to your specs, but they don't have really existing designs as much or really at all for China. We have a little bit of luck with some basics like hoodies and t-shirts and stuff, but nothing like really complex like you can find in China. There's not like you can just go on Alibaba, browse thousands of their items, pick one that you want to sell, and then put your logo on, unfortunately. So it's going to be a lot more involved than your supplier relationship, and getting everything started is going to be more involved in terms of having to get all the tech pack and groundwork done beforehand.
So you're saying you'd have to actually, work on actually manufacturing the product?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of clients, like for clients that sourced a private label product before for years and years out of China, but yeah, when they want to move, they'll get their own designs made, make a couple of tweaks so they have a unique product on the market. But there is going to be some associated costs with tooling, and maybe some mold costs get made associated with that. Depends on the product.
Okay.
But yeah.
I want to dive more into that here in a second, and specifically Vietnam, as you're an expert in that area. But first, just to talk more about the current tariff situation and make sure everybody's up to speed on that. How are you seeing the recent tariff changes affecting Amazon sellers specifically, and which product categories are you seeing hit the hardest?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like with tariffs, you got to get a caveat that this recorded May 20th, so everything can change. Literally, it's changed last week. But yeah, right now it's 30% tariff. It's paused for the 145. It's paused for 9 days, so it's 30% tariff on Chinese goods, and a 10% tariff again, paused for 9 days, and we're about 30 days into that for Vietnamese goods. But I mean, it affects pretty much everything made overseas, especially in China. So I mean, there's not really a product category that's heavily exempted, unfortunately, outside of like maybe some finished electronic goods, like laptops and cell phones, but that's really about it. So it really does kind of affect everybody, but it definitely does have a big relief for a lot of people with reducing from 145 to 30%.
If it's products like, as long as you're actually manufactured in the United States, like supplements or something like that, maybe then you're fine. It's just, anything electronic or that you would normally have to source from China.
Yeah, if you're sourcing in the United States, you should be fine. That being said, even the raw materials that a lot of U.S. manufacturers use are hit by tariffs. Like we work with an EMS supplier, or electronic manufacturing service supplier in the United States that does finished electronic goods, and it's more industrial focused than consumer focused, but yeah, I mean, they're affected by tariffs because they get components from China and elsewhere. And so they're having to pay tariffs on those components. And then once they make the finished product, it still has associated costs with that. There's very few products like outside of maybe wooden goods and supplements, as you mentioned, that are really, truly tariff proof, because still a lot of items, like even like clothing manufacturers, still get a lot of their fabric from overseas. So they're going to pay tariffs on the fabric.
Okay. If someone's looking at, I guess, what is the argument for Vietnam, and I guess what drew you to that initially is looking for another option?
For sure. So actually, for context, I lived in China for 2 years from 2012 to 2014, and I started sourcing from China originally. But yeah, at the time, everybody was sourcing from China, and no one was sourcing from Vietnam. I visited Vietnam in 2013 for the first time, fell in love with the country. So kind of got that seed on my mind that I want to move and start searching for Vietnam. So yeah, in 2014, I had an opportunity to move there. I decided to take advantage of it and started sourcing from Vietnam in 2014, well before anybody else was there. As far as I know, there was really one or two other people that were there sourcing at that point. So I was definitely had a whole country to myself, I suppose. But even then, like 10, 11 years ago, it was much more less developed than it was today. So we were very limited on what we could source. I was trying to get ahead of Trans-Pacific Partnership, which ended up getting nullified. Um, but yeah, we were doing a lot of mainly wooden goods, wood industrial goods at that time. But yeah, I mean, the 10 years since, we've expanded greatly to do a lot more textile and clothing manufacturing, bags, luggage, doing more shoes, plastic injection molding. Even the last few years, electronic manufacturing is kind of probably the fastest growing niche in Vietnam, but it's still a little bit undeveloped. But went from literally basically nothing impossible to do just a few years ago to a few products that we're able to source now quite well.
Okay, nice. So you actually are
Yeah.
seeing Vietnam kind of catch up as like the big one, electronics, and any
Hmm.
other
Yeah.
ones specifically that, people are normally going to in China that maybe they could go straight to Vietnam now.
Yeah. I mean, the products that been sourcing for years and years that I think Vietnam does a better job than China and are anything textile or clothing, apparel based. So anything made of fabric, cut so that ranges from shirts, clothing, apparel of all kind, outerwear to bags, luggage, bed sheets, curtains. They've yeah, the supply chain of Vietnam's very advanced and they can kind of compete at all levels. Same thing with wooden goods. Vietnam's a tropical country, so they have really good quality, high quality hardwoods, really good access to plantations that grow some great wood. So we've been doing wooden good. Literally the very first projects I did in Vietnam were all wooden goods. So yeah, I think the quality to price and at all levels is better in Vietnam. Shoes is definitely kind of on par. If you have higher MOQs, I think it's better in Vietnam. Lower MOQs and private label shoes still better in China, but we just still do a lot of shoe projects. And even like last few years, like plastic and silicone injection molding are kind of growing. So we're just doing a lot more of those types of projects. Some industrial shelving, stamp metal goods, a couple car parts. But yeah, it's definitely kind of growing very tons of investment, literally billions, if not tens of billions of dollars in new investment in manufacturing is happening in Vietnam. So it's definitely a very fast growing and getting more and more sophisticated too on what they can make in Vietnam.
Nice. So you're seeing
Yeah.
quality and MOQs maybe even better in some cases or similar to China.
Well, I think quality for the price is better a lot of times. I'm not going to say all the times, but for a lot of the kind of product categories I mentioned, um, price quality ratios tends to be pretty good in Vietnam. MOQs, I will say, it tends to be higher in Vietnam than in China. Especially in the last month or so, we maintain a database of low MOQ factories, especially for clothing. Um, but like since the 145% tariffs on China were announced lower in Vietnam, I noticed a lot of those factories now are raising their MOQs. So yeah, it's hard to do low MOQs in Vietnam, unfortunately. They do kind of expect you kind of go in with a larger purchase order kind of right off the bat, which does kind of turn off a lot of people, unfortunately, but it is what it is.
For an Amazon seller in the US right
Hmm.
now and sourcing from China, or if
Yeah.
they're just considering, or maybe they're new, um, before considering sourcing from Vietnam, what's your advice for making it productive and successful?
Yeah, I would definitely kind of do your research. It really varies category by category. You can use kind of public database like Import Yeti to see if your product is made in Vietnam or something similar, some construction method done already. Like I said, with a lot of private label goods, because I know a lot of Amazon sellers were doing private label, you do kind of need to make sure you have your tech pack. So I would kind of reach out and talk to some designers about getting the actual design files for your product made. So it's made to manufacture. So the factories have a pretty good understanding. And then, yeah, I mean, once you kind of have that, you're pretty much ready to reach out to a company like us to help find manufacturers and kind of get quotes and do all the groundwork for you and yeah, move manufacturing. But it definitely is going to be a little bit more involved process, especially if you do it on your own and don't work with a partner like us.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. To get help on
Mhm.
that. But I guess if
Yeah.
someone's starting out new, is there the process to do it on their own? Like what you'd say, you mentioned a directory to look at.
I mean, there's there's databases like Import Yeti where you can kind of see
Yeah.
shipments out of the country. Like I would just do that, see if it's feasible, like the product's actually made there. Because I mean, sometimes it gives you the factories, other times it gives you the importer record, which sometimes shipping company, sometimes is the buyer. But yeah, I mean, there's other tools, but yeah, once you kind of do that, once you kind of have product, there's not like unfortunately like Alibaba or a central database of suppliers. You're going to have to do a lot more research on the ground level. Like we personally maintain a database, and we're constantly going trade shows, constantly um attending trade events and whatnot to find new manufacturers. So yeah, it's kind of you do have to do a lot more groundwork to kind of really find the manufacturers, who they are, get their contact information, reach out to them directly by email or phone call, versus just put an RFQ on our website and let the manufacturers come to you. So you're going to have to be the one that chases the manufacturers. And I know a lot of people have literally. I talked to somebody last few weeks ago at this conference I was at. Yeah, he said he reached out to over 100 manufacturers, only got 5 responses and 0 quotes. Basically, once he sent tech back, they kind of ghosted him. So you got to really be selective and really kind of do your research on who these suppliers are and what they can produce.
Just get into like some sourcing strategies.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of the minimum annual revenue an Amazon business should have for considering like multiple court sourcing strategy, or
Yeah,
is it something they should just go ahead and consider right now in this kind of climate?
I mean, I don't know if there's really a minimum revenue per se. I mean, worked with startups that were brand new and only had like $20,000 budgets to really get started. But yeah, if you have like a clothing item or a bag or a backpack, I mean, you can start off relatively cheap, but it depends on if you really want to have that dual sourcing strategy where you have multiple suppliers and are buying from multiple suppliers. You probably do want to have at least probably in the 6 figures, I'd imagine.
Okay.
To really, cause I mean, we do work with a couple sellers who place orders from 2 factories, one in China, one in Vietnam, and yeah, I do want to kind of have the volume to be able to place an order that's above the MOQ with each of the factories.
Okay. Yeah, because it seems like it's gonna that upfront cost is something you have to think about if you're
Yeah,
going to be doing it. Yeah.
yeah, and we work with a lot of like first-time Amazon sellers who never sold on Amazon, starting from scratch, and they go straight to Vietnam and with relatively modest budgets, and it's worked out fine for a lot of clients. Like we did some golf polos, for instance. They're pretty heavily customized, pickleball clothing and stuff like that, and they had relatively modest budgets, like 25K ish. Start out with, and yeah, they succeeded. That's far, or at least from the manufacturing point of view. The stores are relatively new, so knock on wood, they do well in the
Okay.
future. Wish them luck.
As far as, looking at these various suppliers, as far as like communication challenges or
Mm-hmm.
working with them, like what is that looking like now? Is it pretty easy to work, like communicate with suppliers in Vietnam, like China? Is it similar?
It'll be similar. I mean, yeah, any factory that has unique export ambition is going to have at least one English speaker on staff.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's a little different, like culturally, because a lot of times Vietnamese can be pretty straightforward, which is both good and bad. I know a lot of people buying from China, Chinese are really kind of wine and dine you, really kind of make an effort to do a relationship, while Vietnamese are pretty direct. Yeah, we can do that. No, we can't. Here's a quote type deal.
Hmm.
So people kind of get turned off by that, but it's just how they do business. And if you want to visit, though, I mean, it's obviously great. You can take them out, go out to dinner with the factories and visit the factories, and definitely have a relationship that way. But yeah, it is a little different. But yeah, communication is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's relatively casual. I mean, WhatsApp, Zalo, email are pretty standard, and you can translate on those fairly easily. But yeah, for the most part, they'll have at least 1 or 2 English speakers on staff. I will say a lot of times I notice the factories in
Yeah.
Vietnam, they won't have a dedicated sales team per se. They'll have like engineers or floor managers, or the factory managers would have like just kind of do it as a side job task or side task. So it's kind of their secondary goal where they answer emails, which kind of leads to why they're pretty direct um with their emails and whatnot. A lot of times, because just more technical people that they put in charge of sales instead of the really over the top salespeople a lot of times. But it's a mix of each
Yeah.
factory has their own style.
I guess that could buy,
Which was
it's kind of a benefit in a way if you're, trying to source from
Mhm.
it, because you don't have someone that maybe be an expert at negotiating and sales and whatnot. You'd probably get a
Yeah,
better deal in
exactly.
that case.
Yeah, and it's
Um,
great because like we'll do meetings with like I said, the floor manager or the engineers who, they're obviously technical focused. So when you ask them a question about if we make this change, that change, how much or how much time or what the cost will be, and they can answer directly because, we talk to a salesperson. They're like, oh, let me talk to my manager about that. And then get back like 3 days later. So it's definitely get more instant feedback on the more technical aspects.
Yeah, just as far as the communication style. And I remember, talking to suppliers in China years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it did seem like you had to kind of build almost more of a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I mean, to
Yeah.
me, it's like when I hear what you're saying about Vietnam, it almost seems like, well, maybe you're dealing with someone in the US even, because we're more direct
Mm-hmm.
here a lot of times versus we
Yeah.
understand this is just, we need to get the business, to get the
Mm-hmm.
deal done and move on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they
Okay.
know their numbers, like what they need. You need to do like MOQs, your target price, and all that, so they know what their standards are. You meet it, you're good. And they'll like talk to you and like, hey, we can place your order, but we can't do 100 MOQ. If you want to do 1,000, we can work with you then, type deal. But yeah, it definitely is very, yeah, a little bit more direct. But that being said, I mean, like we said, we have clients who visit the factories and they'll take them out to dinner and yeah, like do karaoke, same in China, and they definitely have better relationship. And I definitely always encourage our clients because when with our services, we do direct introductions to the factories. You're not dealing with us as a middleman. We definitely
Okay.
encourage our clients to make that effort to actually get to know the suppliers and visit the suppliers if possible and get to know them because you definitely are going to get better service, get moved up in your production line, have better responses rates when issues come up type deal. So definitely gives you a little bit of leg up when you have a relationship. Yeah.
Tie it back into a little bit more on the current tariff
Mm-hmm.
the current tariff climate that's going on
Yeah.
for somebody right now. What are some simple sourcing changes they could do to significantly reduce their exposure? Like maybe some quick tips they could apply right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, definitely look at options outside of China. I don't know how the trade war is going to go. I mean, I was actually kind of surprised that a deal with China was reached relatively quickly. I was expecting months into the summer, if not the end of the summer. But again, it's only a 30 or 90-day pause, and it's still
Mhm.
at 30% at the pause. So I don't think it's going to go less than 30% in the future. But yeah, definitely start looking outside of or it's China. I think Vietnam's kind of best option for a lot of places, but we've also helped people move factories to Thailand, Indonesia, Mexico, and a few other countries, Philippines, as well. So it's definitely there are going to be a lot of options outside of China for suppliers that are going to have much lower trade risk, tariff risk. You're still going to pay a little bit of tariff, but much less, and you're not going to be caught in the crossfires of the trade war. And then there's also like alternative like inventory and shipping strategies too, like working with custom bonded warehouses or taking advantage of like de minimis if you have a suitable project. Like we work with Portless a lot, and they have warehousing in Vietnam where you can ship it out and still get the de minimis exemption, which knock on wood it stays. It has been talked about getting rid of de minimis completely globally, but hasn't gone into effect yet. And then yeah, custom bonded warehouses and other strategies that you can employ, but it's definitely going to be like a total supply chain audit and figure out each step of the supply chain, how you do inventory, like where you actually do your sourcing and production from, because you actually have to produce the item in Vietnam. You can't just ship it through Vietnam. You have to actually make it in Vietnam.
Okay.
And then yeah, alternative like inventory and warehousing strategies. So I mean, the people that really succeed have options at all aspects of their supply chain, so they can really kind of move and adjust as tariffs change. But yeah, I mean,
Okay.
new news every day. I feel like.
Tell me a little bit more about bonded warehouses. I've heard some about that,
Yeah,
but yeah, can you maybe explain a little more detail how that
for sure.
process works?
Yeah. So the way a shipment typically works is you have a container come in, it goes to the port. Then when it leaves the port, you pay your customs or your taxes, duties, tariffs when it leaves the port and enters the United States. What a customs bonded warehouse does, it enters the port and then you ship it to the customs bonded warehouse. And then when the item leaves the warehouse, it gets taxed. So a lot of times, um, yeah, we'll work with a factory, have a whole container shipment shipped in. Let's just say the container has $100,000 worth of goods and 1,000 items. You pay, or today $30,000 into taxes when it leaves the port, but instead we ship it to customs bonded warehouse when a customer places an order. Reactions on, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, so each time a customer places an order, the items would be shipped out each time from the warehouse. So a $100 item, you pay $30 in tariffs for each shipment, and since you have a customer place an order, you got cash flow coming in, so you can actually, instead of having one big cash flow hit, is you pay the tariffs as the client or your customers place orders, and you have cash flow coming in. So it's much better on your cash flow overall. And also, if you need to re-export it, like maybe you don't sell everything or you want to start selling in Canada, you can have it shipped out of the customs bonded warehouse to Canada or European Union or whatever without ever having to pay tariffs on that shipment. And you get like tariffs, duty drawbacks when you do that, but it's a lot of paperwork, pain in the ass. So you don't have to just do a straight shipment out of the warehouse. So it has its advantages, but you're going to pay more per square footage wise to store goods, obviously. But it's also, if you were like have a shipment come in when it was 145%, you could actually delay it and then pay the 30% tariffs later because you didn't have it go through customs until later.
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely a great strategy for kind of the volatility right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you
absolutely.
just never know what's going to happen over the next few months. And yeah, we'll see. Like, what are you thinking? You're thinking it definitely will go for China specifically. It will be more than a 30% tariff after the 90-day pause.
I mean, I can't say for sure. I can't read the future, and if I knew exactly what will happen, I'd be a very wealthy person. But I mean, there's definitely the tension with both sides, and like Vietnam, like right now it's 10%. We're about 30 days into the pause. But Vietnam's already had 2 rounds of negotiation, and by all accounts, they've gone well, and I expect a trade deal to be announced sooner than later. And they're not doing anything to instigate higher tariffs. They're playing by the rules that the White House expects. I assume they're doing a good job. They seem to be doing a good job. But yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say because like I said, I actually was not expecting the pause to be announced as soon as it was. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's really hard to say what's going to happen in the future.
For sure. It seems like, we're going to come up on Q4. Everybody's going to be prepping for Q4 kind of right about the time all this.
This really right about now.
Yeah.
Because,
that's my next question. As far as preparing for Q4, what would you say there? What does that look like? Do you think people should be like looking at that right now and kind of planning their strategy?
Yeah, I mean, work a lot of buyers who are already planning for Q4 and moving production and starting like April with anticipation of getting orders in by Q4. So it definitely is something you kind of need to get the ball rolling now, get in, because I mean, get set up, find a new manufacturer, get quotes, get the tooling if needed, and get manufacturing. You're looking at 5 months, just for the production. So it's definitely something that you really kind of need to start now. Because I mean, shipment from Vietnam to China is 5 to 8, or Vietnam, United States, 5 to 8 weeks. So working backwards from November 1st, which is when you probably want to get your goods in inventory ready to sell for Q4, 5 to 8 months. So which means production's need to be into September. We're looking at 30, 60 days for production. So that means you need to start production really in early July. And since, you want to get started in July, you need to get the quotes and get the purchase orders and everything set up now, really.
Yeah. Maybe even look at bonded warehouses if that's an option. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess those are getting a little more expensive now, potentially, because of everything that's going on. Okay.
Yeah. I think we were thinking of alternative ways too. Like you can actually have it shipped from your factory to a warehouse in Vietnam or even China. And then like we were with some clients, like, they place a order every 3 months, for instance. So what they're doing is having an order shipped to warehouse in Vietnam, and once a month, instead of doing once every 3 months, they're having their product shipped out from the warehouse just to, have the inventory in stock, and then in anticipation that maybe tariffs will go away next month. And like I was talking to we have one seller who did that strategy. He paid a 145% tariff. He was in China specifically, but he paid a 145% tariff for 1 month 1 month worth of goods out of China. But then when the 30% went, he was ready to kind of get everything shipped out at once and just pay the 30% tariff, for instance. So instead of having like 3 months of goods come out once he only had to pay 145% on effectively a third of a typical order for him.
Okay, so you're actually saying go ship from, like if you got your manufacturers in China,
Yeah.
ship it to a warehouse in Vietnam first, then.
Or no. If you want to ship from the country of origin, you can't do transshipment. So if you're doing
Okay.
Vietnam or China, just ship it to a warehouse in the country that's produced it, and then just do smaller shipments instead of one
Oh,
large
okay,
shipment.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. I
But yeah, don't do
misunderstood that.
transshipment. That's illegal unless you
Okay.
correctly declare country of origin. But yeah.
Gotcha. One thing I meant to ask, as far as lead times, is that pretty much the same, more or less, from China compared to Vietnam, for
Yeah.
example?
It can be a little bit slower, especially for first time orders, just because a lot of times they do have to order raw materials and components. And a lot of times that does come from China still, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, in terms of actual production, it depends on the product, but it should be effectively the same once you place a purchase order for them to actually start or have the finished goods. But I mean, we always get lead time quoted when we ever get quotes, and just so they have that as a reference, 'cause it can definitely vary.
Okay. We're coming to near the end here. And yeah, this is obviously pretty complex thing that maybe a lot of sellers might not want to have to deal with on their own. So yeah, if they wanted to contact you about services and help on this, how can they do so?
Yeah, you can visit our website, cosmosourcing.com. We're on all the socials as Cosmos Sourcing as well. See the spelling behind me. And then, yeah, if you want to send me an email directly, jim@cosmosourcing.com is my direct email. Otherwise, yeah, just find me on the socials or fill out a form on our website. Contact us in the corner like every website. So yeah, reach out that way.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll leave all that info down in the description below
Perfect.
for our listeners so they can find that easily. And yeah, Jim, great, a lot of knowledge on sourcing. Glad you came on, and yeah, appreciate your
it's a
time.
pleasure.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.